Okay, Robert, we are live.
Great, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to the closing plenary of the ACSA 110 virtual conference. Big thank you to all the authors, presenters, and moderators for their fantastic presentations and discussions. Just a reminder, all sessions are available in the conference platform through June 20th. I want to thank our steering committee, reviews committee, the ACSA staff for organizing this terrific conference and bringing us all together. Finally, thank you to all the moderators and reviewers for the time and commitment. We hope that you've enjoyed the conversations, made new connections, and learned new methods and areas of teaching, research, and practice. Remember to complete the continuing education online form that has been included in the conference daily emails as well. ACSA staff will submit your credits, and if requested, we can send you a certificate of completion. Now I'd like to invite AIA President Dan Hart to join me as we introduce the closing keynote. Each year, the AIA ACSA Topaz Medallion for Excellence in Architectural Education is awarded jointly by the American Institute of Architects and the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, ACSA. The Topaz jury includes jurors from the AIA, ACSA, and AIAS. Together, they review and select the winning recipient. Architecture's future depends on its next generation of leaders and the educators who impact their lives. The Topaz Medallion honors those who educate others to ensure architecture's enduring excellence. The Topaz Medallion is awarded to an individual who has had a significant impact upon architectural education and the discipline and practice of architecture. It is the highest award the organizations make to an educator and reflects our joint commitment to recognize service to the profession, academy, and society. The individual's impact should be evident from peer-recognized, broadly influential achievements, including but not limited to architectural projects, research, and publication and teaching.
Thank you, Robert. For more than 40 years, Deborah Burke, FAIA, has nimbly harmonized education and practice, engaging the discipline of architecture with students and professionals from a wide range of backgrounds. Through her accessible and purposefully non-monumental pedagogical approach, Burke advances her deep-rooted belief that architectural education should be available to everybody. Her meaningful contributions and seemingly inexhaustible spirit have inspired countless students and design professionals. Burke's teaching career began shortly after her graduation from the Rhode Island School of Design, when she founded an architecture education program for high school students at New York's Institute for Architecture and Urban Studies. Students enrolled in the program were presented with a broad range of perspectives on architecture and the city, which helped them better understand the built environment's forms and creation. Those early experiences, coupled with the cross-disciplinary art-based education she received, greatly influenced her teaching at her alma mater, the University of Miami, at the University of California, Berkeley, and at the Yale School of Architecture, where she has served as dean since 2016. Notably, she is the first woman to lead that school. Last year, she was appointed to a second term based on the success of her initiatives to diversify the faculty and student body and to support cross-disciplinary initiatives. Her efforts included the Yale Center for Ecosystems and Architecture, the school's first architectural sciences lab, and the introduction of an urban studies major for undergraduates. As Yale's dean, she has sought to impart her engaged approach in every graduate architecture student's education. She partnered with the school's renowned building project, where first-year students design and build a house in New Haven with an organization that helps find permanent housing for people experiencing homelessness. Additionally, she is supporting the creation of a collaborative course that aims to investigate and end the practice of slavery in the construction supply chain. Through the combination of Burke's ethics, educational experience, and keen understanding of spaces that support creativity and learning, her practice, New York's Deborah Burke Partners, has assembled an expansive portfolio of projects for institutions of higher learning. Since 1982, clients such as Yale, Princeton University, and the University of Pennsylvania have looked to the firm to create flexible and welcoming learning spaces that are reflective of each school's culture and mission. The firm's work has been lauded with the National Design Award from the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum and dozens of awards from local and state AIA chapters. Recently, in keeping with Burke's values, the firm expanded from 3 to 11 partners. The move increased the number of women and partners of color while reinforcing a multi-generational leadership structure. Among her many accolades and accomplishments, I'm curious to know where this rates for Deborah. She is referenced extensively in the 2017 independent film Columbus. The young protagonist in the film cites Burke's Irwin Union Bank as her third favorite building. Not exactly a design award, but an impressive affirmation nonetheless, Deborah. In her roles as professor and practitioner, Burke has evolved critical design thinking and equipped tomorrow's architects with the skills to face pressing societal and environmental challenges for the greater good. Her insightful leadership and distinct contributions to the profession ensure that her influence will continue to reverberate for generations. What an honor it is for me as president of the American Institute of Architects to confer the 2022 AIA ACSA Topaz Medallion for Excellence in Architectural Education to Deborah Burke, FAIA. Congratulations, Deborah.
Thank you. I know I am about to be giving a keynote talk, and it will take a minute to get that set up from here, but Dan and Robert, thank you so much for those truly kind and generous words. And audience, be patient with us for 1 second as we move to sharing the screen. Are we there? Robert or Dan or even Eric, can you tell me if you can see the screen, a title?
Yep, we can
That's
see it.
That's great. Terrific. Thank you. Well, thank you to you two, Dan and Robert, for that introduction, as I just said, in words of welcome. And Eric, thanks for your help in getting this set up. And greetings to everyone. I'm sorry I can't see your faces. It is truly, I hope you saw me smile as Dan spoke. It is truly an incredible honor to be this year's recipient of the Topaz Medallion. I am thrilled. I'm a bit overwhelmed. I mean, the day I heard, I actually cried. And I am just sad, as I said, that we're not together in person, so I could better express my emotion to you, colleagues, in this work that we do, that I could express it directly. This is what it actually looks like. I was flabbergasted, to use a word my grandmother would use, when this medal arrived. And as Robert noted a few minutes ago, the description of the Topaz Award, as it reads on the AIA website, or maybe Eric read this, I can't remember, or Dan, you can tell I can't remember, is that it is presented to an individual who has had a significant impact on architectural education and the discipline and practice of architecture. It is the highest award the organization makes to an educator and reflects their joint commitment to recognize service to the profession, academy, and society. So you can tell why I was moved. I was also a bit curious as to why it was called the Topaz. So I went to Wikipedia, which is of course an embarrassing thing for an academic to admit. It's not a good source. Wouldn't accept it from any of my students. So I beg your understanding on that. The topaz, it turns out, is one of the hardest naturally occurring minerals. And I thought that perhaps that was the reason for the name of this prize, as teaching architecture and serving the academy, the profession, and society is pretty damn hard, particularly hard over the past few years, as we all know. Now, I have been teaching architecture for a very, very long time, as Dan said, and I will bore you briefly at the beginning of this talk with a little autobiography. You see me here, much less gray than I am now, pointing out the detailing on Sarin and CBS building to a group of high school students in a program that I actually co-founded with Larry Kudnicki at the Institute for Architecture and Urban Studies in New York. That was Peter Eisenman's sort of educational think tank in the late 1970s. I was pretty broke in that period. And so during that time, I also taught in an NEA program that sadly I don't think exists anymore, called Artists in Schools, which paid you the extraordinary sum of $100 a day to go into public schools 1 or 2 days a week. They had, you know, dancers, poets, musicians, painters, and architects. And I used 2-scale model making to help these kids conquer fractions, as well as overcome what was the burden of being in the not so good in math section in their public elementary school in Flatlands, Brooklyn. And you can see the model of the classroom there. You can't see in this picture the globe they made out of a tiny little pink ball, but they were the envy of all the other kids in the school because they got to do something this cool. Now, later on in my time teaching at the Institute, I ran their educational programs as an administrator, and that institution also didn't have much money. So I was, you know, bursar, registrar, unofficial guidance counselor, in addition to being the junior most member of the design faculty. And in the long run, thinking back on it, I think that experience of talking to students then, when I wasn't that much older than they were, really helped me in my teaching career as it went on. In subsequent years, I taught at the University of Maryland, the University of Miami, and briefly at RISD, noted my alma mater. And in this drawing, you can see some of the student work from a course called Formal Analysis, which I taught at the University of Maryland. And to put some time frame context on this, these drawings are actually ink on Mylar. So for those of you old enough to remember the brutal task of cleaning your rapidograph pens, that's how these drawings were done. And then in 1988, then Dean at the Yale School of Architecture, Tom Beebe, asked me to apply for a junior teaching position at Yale. I am a native New Yorker, and moving back to the Northeast from Washington, DC, appealed to me. My parents were aging. What you see in the photograph on the left is friend and colleague and noted Professor Alan Plattis, also still at Yale. And in the background, the inimitable concrete walls of the Paul Rudolph building, which at this time housed both art and architecture. And those walls have not changed. Cannot change, I would say. In 2013, I taught for a semester at the University of California at Berkeley. And part of what I did there as the Berkeley Rupp professor was to install a version of my architectural office. Literally, that table that you see in this slide is the same one that's behind me on the screen. Installed this in their gallery and use it as a space to meet with students so that practice itself and teaching were more closely linked physically and experientially. And then I went back to Yale on the left with my colleague, Stephen Harris, and while on the photograph in the right was taken the day of the announcement of my appointment as the dean to the school. And you can see there with me the then dean, Bob Stern, who had served as dean for 18 years, and Yale president, Peter Salovey, announcing to the students and the faculty the decision as to who the next dean was going to be and making that introduction. It was both an exhilarating and slightly terrifying day for me. I have now been dean for 6 years, none of them easy. And to my fellow deans, chairs, and other academic leaders out in the audience, you know what it's like. None of those jobs are easy, but the last 2.5 years have been particularly difficult for everybody around the planet, of course, but particularly for students and the staff and faculty that work with them. This image is actually from last weekend at a commencement for alumni, which is, I guess, no longer an inherently contradictory pairing of words, as universities all over the country acknowledge those who completed their studies during the really difficult circumstances of the COVID pandemic and the closing of campuses. And for architecture schools, the difficulty of translating studio culture to Zoom meetings and Zoom teaching sessions. So I can't see you, so I don't know who you are, but I assume many of you are educators or teach or practice or teach and practice, however you shape your life as an architect and designer. You know there has been a lot going on in the world. I think one way to address that, and this was alluded to a little bit in the introduction, is through teaching. Another is through writing. And in 1997, Stephen Harris, who you saw in that picture previously, a colleague at Yale, and I edited a small volume of essays called Architecture of the Everyday. It was published by Princeton Architectural Press and included articles by Mary McLeod, Joan Achman, Mabel Wilson, and Peggy Deemer, among others, noted architectural educators, as well as photographs by Gregory Crutzen, now head of photography at Yale. His photograph is on the cover, and included design projects by the graphic designer Sheila de Bretteville, and the architect Marianne Ray. And although I am not a very good writer at all, and these volumes are definitely the result of a lot of collaborative work, writing and getting your voice and opinion out there, I think, is also an important and necessary way to address built environment concerns. Another way, of course, is through practice. You see my office here. We're on 2 floors. This is the floor below where I'm currently sitting. We're in an old office, what was a 1904 office building in New York City. And we do projects across the United States. We are, as was stated, a partnership based in New York City. And we are, as was already noted, a very diverse group of people, not only in terms of background, but also educational background and the kind of skill set different people bring to the office. We work on many, many program types. And you can see study models here. We work a lot in models, but I think for me, certainly as a practitioner, and it's helped in my teaching as well, one of the great joys has been to explore different program types simultaneously. So we do private houses, not all of them flat roofed, although the ones that I elected to show you here tonight all have flat roofs and are scattered in this particular image around the Northeast and Central Midwest. We do some rather unique hotels, many of them adaptive reuse projects, and adaptive reuse is something I'm quite passionate about. And many of them focused on the arts. In this slide alone, they're in Louisville, Oklahoma City, upstate New York, Bentonville, Arkansas, and Kansas City. And we do offices and office buildings. This building for Cummins Engine is in downtown Indianapolis. We also work for organizations and institutions with social missions like the GMHC, the Planned Parenthood Foundation and the Wallace Foundation, others with meaningful agendas. I think that ties to being an educator because, of course, schools and universities and colleges are also mission driven to educate and expand access to knowledge and skills. As was mentioned in the introduction, we work on educational projects in a variety of sizes and in areas of study, including student residences and dormitories. These are 2 new residential colleges on the Princeton University campus. They will, when they're complete, have 1,000 beds in them total. So that's an enormous increase in the size of Princeton's undergraduate population. And we also do cultural and community centers, this one being called 122CC, formerly Public School 122. As you know, in New York, PSs are what the schools are called. It's a former New York City public school from the late 19th century, now home to 5 different arts organizations, including dance, theater, playwriting, and painting, among others. Now, you may be thinking, why is she telling us all this stuff? And why, for God's sake, is she talking so much about herself? That's a good question. If there are people in the audience who know me, you may know that it's actually not my style to talk about myself or to brag about my work, even if I am the recipient of this extraordinary Topaz Prize this year. But I think it's important to set up what I want to say in this talk, which is not going to be very long, I promise you. It's Friday and it's the end of the workday, at least on the East Coast. But here's why I wanted to tell you that. I tell you that because architecture does not look like this. And also, architects don't look like this. We are entering the 3rd decade of the 21st century, and we, by that I don't mean architects, I mean humans, are building bad buildings and cities, and the world is on fire. Recent research indicates that we will irreversibly cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rise across the globe in 2025. That's like tomorrow. These are things to worry about, and not just worry about. As educators and practitioners, we really actually have to do something. Here's what I think we need to do in architecture. You don't have to agree, and I'm not going to read it aloud to you, but I believe you should believe something, believe it strongly with a passion, and then teach and practice accordingly. And I wrote these words, they're in the manifesto, the very soft manifesto at the back of the Architecture of the Everyday book. I wrote these words in 1997, and I have really lived my life as an educator and as a practitioner to the extent that I could, and I continue to try accordingly. We as architects need to make it possible for people from all different kinds of backgrounds and cultures to study architecture and become architects. And we, as educators, we can do that. And I think it's also really important to acknowledge, and I say this even with the president of the AIA participating, that architects alone don't determine the built environment. We are part of a large team that includes structural, mechanical, and civil engineers, among others, like acousticians and lighting designers and sustainability consultants and wayfinding consultants and preservationists and landscape architects and botanists and environmentalists and urban planners and regional planners and transportation engineers, all professions with similar issues of underrepresentation of women and minorities. And all of that stuff, all of those professions I just listed, and I probably left some out, that's before the building is even built, because then there is the very complex choreography of construction, which includes skilled teams of people who can form and pour concrete, frame with timber or steel, plumb, wire, waterproof, tile, and paint. And I think we should ask ourselves, who gets to do this? How do we train them? How much do we pay them? How much do we respect what they do? And how much do they respect what we do? And how do we change and improve that in both directions? And of course, who decides what can and can't be done? How tall can it be? And what use type can it be? Where can you build? What can you build? And who do we, as architects, as part of the team, large team of people who help create the built environment, who do we build for? So here are a few things I think we can do as educators. Integrate environmental issues and carbon footprint awareness into all design projects. Find funding for data-driven investigations and studies at many scales. Teach and address the supply chain issues and human suffering complexities of construction, both historically and today, actually, where both production and particularly excavation around the world is done by indentured labor. I think it's good to have your students build something with their hands as a team, so they get to know what it is like to work together and how materials actually go together. They might end up doing better drawings when they're architects. And it's good even if they build something complex and something sustainable. Encourage your students to show their ideas in a variety of ways, including exhibitions and publications. And I think maybe above all, have a sense of humor about what it is to be an architect. Credit our friends at Point Supreme for this drawing. And have a generosity of spirit toward one's fellow architects and students, not just a competitive spirit, despite the word ambition at the center of this slide. And of course, together, we have to figure out how to make architectural education more affordable. Being an architect and teaching the next generation of architects is absolutely great. I think I've said this already now, you can tell I'm tired and it's a Friday and the semester is just about over. It's burdensome, it's infuriating, but it is also profoundly fulfilling. And there's nothing I love more actually than a messy studio space. And I think the same is true of practice, particularly if you make it so. We in our office, for instance, host exhibitions for artists whose work we find meaningful or playful and fun, and people who often don't have the opportunity for gallery representation. That is Kiki Smith. She does have gallery representation, but she came to see the work of one of the artists we had up on our walls. From time to time, we run kids' workshops. This one happens to be at the Cooper Hewitt, but we do them in local schools as well. We try to be engaged and engaging beyond the world of design insiders. And I think it's important in that context to also acknowledge that there are many other issues that confront and stress humans that architecture actually can't address, like say in this particular slide, working to help raise funds to find a cure for breast cancer, participating in fundraising on issues that we care about outside our area of expertise. I would really like architects and architecture to be less intimidating, so people feel they can engage in conversation about and share in the shaping of the built environment. Now I have appeared on podcasts. As was noted in the introduction, I was a character in a movie, although I actually wasn't in the movie and actually didn't know I was a character in the movie till I went to see the movie and discovered it. But I have appeared on podcasts, and I have been on Ina Garten's Barefoot Contessa TV show, Eating Well and Arguing for Good Design. So not every exposure and in talking about architecture has to be serious. I think it can also be inclusive by being fun. But really what I am interested in is this, an architecture of the greater good. And that includes all the issues I've just mentioned, like engagement, plurality, inclusion. I think my list of adjectives to describe the architecture of the greater good would be something like this, that it's unique without arrogance, it's original without pretension, it's honorable and ethical, it's truthful and wise and compassionate, but nevertheless still a little ornery. I mean, it's okay to be ornery. We're not trying to be Mother Teresa. We're architects. And we can argue for new meaning and expression in design. Yet I do think it is important to always be considerate of others and open-minded. Open-minded means in architecture, I think, being open to new ways of imagining the future. There are many, many ways to build. These are not new challenges. This is not a newsflash. They are difficult ones to overcome, which is why they remain challenges. But I think we as architects and designers, the primary contributing authors of the built environment, must address them. We are here together and we must work together to design and build better buildings, better spaces, better cities, better systems and regions. And in addition to that, I think we should be talking about beauty, maybe most importantly. Beauty is something I believe everyone is entitled to have access to. And we as architects should design to engage a diverse community, create beauty, and offer joy. Through great buildings, but also through great spaces. They can be pluralistic and messy. I think it really means being open to new ways of thinking, seeing, creating, and for all of us, also for teaching, of being a voice and having a voice, of promising to be generous to all, to commit to the future of a very livable planet. We as architects are not going to be the people who find a cure for COVID. We will not be writing more just legislation, although I think more architects should consider running for office. However, with our talent, with our vision, and with a willingness to work with others across disciplines, with that commitment to create an architecture of the greater good, I think we can make the planet a better place and contribute to a more just built world, as messy and unfinished as that might perpetually be. It can always be on its way to beauty, joy, and good. So thank you very much. Give you a little bit of your Friday afternoon back. And thank you again, ACSA and AIA, for the Topaz. I am truly, deeply, deeply honored.
Great, congratulations. Congratulations again, Deborah. Wonderful to have you be here and to end our conference. Our conference began with a wonderful plenary with Milton Curry on our steering committee and Lauren Matchison at USC, who runs a summer camp. So we began with a summer camp and we ended with a summer camp that you initiated that launched your career. So what a wonderful circle to complete. Thank you and good night to everyone. Thank you for joining us at this year's conference. Thank you, Dan, for joining me. with this celebratory final event. Good night, everyone.
Good
Thank
night.
you all. Good night.